Now, many families have disagreements, but why would the father sue his own daughter? That question is at the heart of an incredible new book from journalist Mimi Kwa, and who joins us now from Melbourne. Mimi, it's a pleasure to speak to you today. Before we get to your father suing you, did he really have 31 brothers and sisters? And was he really descended from a Chinese emperor?
Well, every Chinese person believes that they are descended from a Chinese emperor. So there is an expression, children of the dragon. So in many ways, yes, of course, my dad is a descendant from a Chinese emperor. But I do also have a family tree that apparently proves it. But before we go into our conversation, can I just say a big hello to you both, Tristan and Nerelda. Nerelda, I haven't seen you. Full disclosure here, Nerelda and I went to university together and we have not seen each other for 20 years, and now we're on Zoom. It's amazing.
She had some beer pong stories she wanted to tell.
Not quite a beer pong, but Mimi, I'm so proud of you. You've gone on to amazing things. You've written a book. I mean, look at us 2 decades later, from humble beginnings at Whopper.
Oh, I know the time that's flown. And I'm just so grateful that I know, Nerelda, you received the book and have read it. I don't know whether you have, Tristan, if you've had a chance to flip through it.
But Mimi, one thing that just became so apparent was that I didn't know any of this about your background as I'm reading it, and thinking, you know, we hung out together every day for a couple of years, and all of that history in your family, it's just being poured onto those pages, including the fact that your mum suffered from schizophrenia. What was that like growing up?
Yeah, I think the reason that I didn't share a lot of my, I guess for lack of a better word, trauma from my childhood was because, you know, as with us all, we cover things up and we just deal with things and we take one step at a time and move through life. But as I became a mother myself, I've got 4 children, I realised how important it is to really overcome my own shame and intergenerational inherited shame and trauma. And in answer to your question, what was it like growing up with a mum who was, you know, chronically and severely schizophrenic and undiagnosed? It was really tough, and I didn't realise at the time, but looking back I think, wow, I want to give that little girl that was me a big hug, and even more so, I love being able to give my mum a big hug every day. She actually lives behind me here over my other shoulder there, so she's got a little granny flat on our property, so she's next door living with us. And to me, the greatest gift that I could give to her was to, you know, to promise to look after her for the rest of her life.
Oh, that's great. That's beautiful, yeah. Another key character in your life was your Auntie Teresa. Who was she, and how did she become friends with the Australian First Lady?
Also, Auntie Teresa was amazing. She was my mentor. In many ways, she was my saviour. And as we all know, it just takes, you know, one really strong influence in your life to help you get through some tough times. If you are going through tough times, you can see there on the screen, there's Auntie Mary, Auntie Clara, and Auntie Teresa with her hand on my shoulder when I was a little girl in Hong Kong. Well, Auntie Teresa became the world's first air hostess for BOAC, which is now British Airways. And in the 1950s, she was selected from hundreds of applicants to become one of 6 Hong Kong air hostesses for the British carrier. And through that job, where she would really crew aeroplanes where there would only be 15 passengers on board, because of course in those days flights were only for the rich, wealthy, famous and influential. And she met some incredible people, including Lady McMahon, and they had a lovely time together. And there's a story that I tell in the book about when she met Lady McMahon's husband, who happened to be the Prime Minister of Australia at the time.
What a beautiful story. Mimi, your father developed a liking for litigation. Among the places that he sued was Barocca, but he also sued you. Why, and what's the relationship like, you know, after that?
Wow, how do I answer such a big question? He sued me because of my Auntie Teresa's estate. So my Auntie Teresa, who I just told you a bit about, who was obviously somebody with whom I had an incredibly close relationship, left me in charge of her estate here in Australia. Most of the estate, mind you, went to my dad. It was more that she wanted me to look after all of the paperwork to save him from doing it. But I think because of that strong Chinese tradition that I think is in the bones of many bones in the blood of many Chinese people, is that, you know, it is a culture that's ruled by the patriarchy, and my dad felt that very strongly, that a woman should not be in charge of something so important, and so he sued me.
Wow.
Mimi, a lot of families, people who are listening to you speak now, would have ghosts in their family and skeletons in their family's closets and just not willing to confront it. Is there a sense of freedom and closure, or, you know, is there any advice you could give to families who haven't wanted to confront this because it's just it's in the too hard basket, or they don't want to bring things up that are in the past?
Absolutely. I think bringing up any sort of trauma that any of us has experienced, and I don't know anybody who hasn't had some sort of tumultuous relationship with someone in their family, or isn't estranged from somebody in their family, either, you know, in their immediate family or extended family. And I think it's difficult. Touching trauma is difficult. Confronting the past is really difficult. You know, this book to me was my healing, to be able to actually pore over the past and look at my father's upbringing and look at my mother's upbringing and understand her condition, now that I can look at it through the eyes of a grown-up and not of a child who was just grappling to survive at the time. So now that I can look at my father's past and understand the intergenerational trauma that he experienced and that was passed down to him, that has really helped my healing. And so I suppose my advice would be that is, when you look at the past and you understand the past, you can understand so much more about yourself in the present. And from that, I think it's actually possible to find forgiveness. And beyond forgiveness, it's possible, in my experience, I actually have experienced this overwhelming gratitude for everything that my parents have done for me, because I know that they did the very best that they knew how to do at the time, and I know that they love me, and some of the things that happened were because of that love for me. And so I'm just very grateful.
Oh, Mimi, that's great.
Yeah.
That is great, and it's such an important and beautiful message as well. Mimi Kwa's new book is called House of Kwa. If you're like me, you're going to want to read it now. Thanks so much for joining us, Mimi. All the best.
Mimi,
Thank
lots of
you.
love. Words of wisdom there.